Well, hello everybody. Hope you all are doing well. It finally feels like summer where we are, and we're excited to really just be here today with one of the survivors that we have the privilege of knowing. This is Julie. So we're going to be talking to her today and highlighting her as one of our faces of the fight. So Julie, do you want to just tell us a little bit about yourself, tell our audience who you are, where you come from, and all those good things?
Sure. So I am, first of all, a wife and a mother. I have 6 kids. I never thought I would have 6 kids. That's a lot. So we're kind of the Brady Bunch, but we're a combined family. And I live in Utah, and I enjoy all things outdoors. We're fortunate enough to live by a lake, and so we have a really fun lifestyle where we're outdoors a lot. I also have a background. I'm a survivor of sex trafficking, and I'm currently still in recovery from that. It's probably going to be a lifetime process, but I feel like I'm getting better all the time.
Wonderful. 6 kids.
6.
I have 2, and that's a lot. So I can imagine that you're constantly being pulled in a lot of directions.
Yes.
That's fun. What has been the biggest like learning thing through COVID for you as a parent?
Patience.
Yeah.
Patience and trying to solve boredom, I think, is the biggest thing.
Yes. What has been your most creative way to solve boredom?
Thankfully, just like I said, we live in a great area, so we can be outside a lot of the time. So we take a lot of walks. We got a puppy, and that helps because that kept us busy.
Part of the COVID puppies. I
Yes.
feel like there's been a rash of those. There's that and kittens.
Yeah. Probably.
Awesome. I love that. So, I mean, really, can you just share with our audience a little bit about your story and what you feel like you want to tell them today?
Sure. So my story happened about 10 years ago, and it took me until 2016 to really get free from my trafficker. So it was a long journey, but about 10 years ago, I was a mother and a wife, and I was in a domestic violence marriage situation, and things were really rough for me. And when my husband was arrested for domestic violence, I was contacted by a father of a preschool teacher, a preschool student. I was a preschool teacher at the time, and he just befriended me, and he was there for me. He showed up when I needed him, and I was cautious to let anybody into my life at that point, but he was just so caring, and I felt like he was in a way like a guardian angel that I had come across and that I had been hoping for so long. And shortly thereafter, he became very controlling and dominating and threatening and violent. And it turned out that he was a trafficker, and so I was hoping to be rescued and only ended up in a worse situation. And so he trafficked me for 5 months and took me to different states and brought men to me to an apartment that he got me. And it took 5 months to get free of him. Somebody on the outside had to help me and realize that something was going on and didn't look right and question me about it. And that's really the catalyst for me getting out of the situation.
Thank you for sharing. I can only imagine, and so that is you sharing your story just helps all of us try to even wrap our minds around something that really is foreign. That as much as we understand parts of this industry, there's nothing like your testimony and what your lived experience is. You mentioned the domestic violence piece, and I think that's a really important thing to talk about, because domestic violence can be a gateway, especially for those who maybe are trafficked as adults and not as minors. And so what were some of those intersection points that you had with people, whether it was the domestic violence situation or really into the trafficking situation? You obviously were around family or you saw other people. Like, where were those moments where you felt like, I just wish somebody would ask me that question sooner?
Yeah, there were so many. So if I look back on my whole life, I mean, trafficking didn't just happen. I was in a bad marriage with domestic violence previous to that, and before that I was abused sexually as a child. And I think that especially the abuse as a child, really set me on a path in my life, and an unfortunate one where I would tolerate worse and worse treatment, and I didn't have proper boundaries for my own body. I didn't value myself as much as I would have if I had a healthy childhood. And so I think at any point during my life, I think somebody could have intervened when I was a child, and that could have drastically changed my life. Maybe none of it would have happened. Second to that was during my marriage. If somebody, I know that there were people that saw me in my marriage and had questions about what was going on in it, and maybe it didn't look just right. But I know a lot of people think, well, that's not my business. I shouldn't get involved, or I don't want to cause trouble, or I don't want to make an accusation. But I can tell you from being the person inside of it, I wish they had. And so there was an opportunity there. Obviously, with my trafficking, we went to 5 different states. I was seen in truck stops, in restaurants, gas stations, hotels. There were plenty of people that saw me, and I don't know exactly what they thought. I know that some of them, in their defense, thought that I was a willing participant. If they questioned it at all, they probably thought that I was there of my own free will. And that's just not the case. I mean, you don't always see the chains around somebody, but there's invisible chains that can hold you so tight and so captive. And those are come in the way of threats of violence, blackmail, all sorts of different ways that they can hold you captive. Fear and shame and guilt, those things can hold you very much in place, just like a physical chain would. So there were a lot of places where I saw people, and I know that they saw me. There was one example when I couldn't take his verbal assault any longer, and I decided to jump from the moving vehicle. And I jumped out and was running down the road, and a car was coming the opposite direction, and they slowed down as if to stop and help me. But right before I could reach them, my trafficker caught up with me and dragged me by the hair back to his vehicle. And this car lingered for a few moments and then drove on. And I just think I don't blame them, because that was a scary situation and they probably didn't want to be involved in that. And again, they might have thought it wasn't their business or something, but had they been able to make a simple phone call to a hotline or to the police and reported it, I just wonder what might have changed for me that day, and maybe I would have been spared a lot of suffering.
So people in America sometimes think that trafficking looks a certain way. Clearly, your story blows that out of the water and shows that it can happen to any of us, and that really nobody is outside of even those things that can make them vulnerable. We talk a lot about myths and trafficking. Are there any things that stand out to you that you want the world to know is really a myth about trafficking that's important for them to understand in order to really be effective to see something and say something?
Yeah, for sure. I'm trying to think of the best way to say it. It's just appearances can be deceiving. You might see an ad for a girl on Craigslist or somewhere where she's selling her services or something horrible like that, and she might be smiling in the photo and look like she's completely willing and on her own free will involved in this. But you don't see the man across the way with a gun in his lap. You don't see her trafficker sitting across from her, making verbal threats to her, whispering things to her. So I know that at one truck stop, when I went inside, the employee that was working there said, "Don't bring that in here," referring to me as that. And it broke my heart, but I also understand that he's probably around that, and he's probably seen other prostitutes come and go through the truck stops. And I just don't think that he understands that it's not always as it appears. That I personally wasn't smiling at the time, but there were other women there that looked like they were fully invested in what they were doing. And that's just not always the case. It can look one way and it can be something completely different. And so I think if you see any signs at all that make you look a little bit further and take a little bit more interest in what's going on and think, maybe I'm not seeing the whole picture, maybe there's more to it than just what is in front of me, and take a closer look, then we could save a lot of people.
Absolutely. That's powerful.
So, talk to us a little bit about your healing journey. I know that often people are like, great, they've been rescued, which is huge, and we have to increase victim identification, and we have to help, see more people escape their trafficking situation. But can you talk to us a little bit about what that's been like for you, who have been those support people for you, and what hope you kind of hopefully have for your future?
Sure. So, when I was initially, my rescue kind of came in stages. The first part of it was where somebody intervened and saw something that didn't look quite right and questioned it and questioned me, and I was able to trust this person enough to answer some hard questions, and that was the initial break from my trafficker. And then it took several weeks after that to actually get free from him, because it's a very complicated process. It's a dangerous one, and I think that's a dangerous time. And so I was able to get free from him physically, and then it took several years to get free from him in the court system. He stalked me, and I had to go through several court hearings for that. And then he was ultimately deported from the country for some various crimes, and I was able to testify and be part of that. But apart from getting free from him physically, is getting free from him mentally, which I found to be difficult, because all of the things that he told me about myself, they live in my mind, and they come up when I don't want them to, and it's hard to shake that. And I have memories and flashbacks that I have to live with. And so getting free from him in my mind has been a little bit harder of a journey, actually, but I'm getting there, and I'm making some great strides, and I feel like there is hope. There is light at the end of the tunnel. There's life after trafficking. It is not the end of your life. It feels like it in the moment. I thought there was no way I could recover from just what I had lived through, let alone the effects that had on me and my personal life, and the shame that I carried and the guilt that I carried for those things that I witnessed and was a part of that I didn't want to be a part of. But I can tell you that there is hope, and it does, when you start to really see it for what it is, and that it's this evil crime that's perpetrated against you, that you had no part in. You weren't willing, even though you cooperated or appeased your trafficker. That's what you had to do to survive. And it's important that you do what you have to do to survive. I mean, survival is the number one priority, and hopefully you do survive at all costs. And then when you have to deal with the aftermath of that, you just really have to separate. This was done to me. This was something done to me. It was a bad, terrible thing done to me, but I'm not bad. I'm not terrible. I'm the victim. I'm the survivor of these things.
That's amazing. Now you touched on it some, but we have many survivors who reach out to us on our channels who want to know exactly that there is hope, that there is life after trafficking, that there is, that they have dignity, value, and worth as a human being and not as a commodity. But what's your message to survivors who might be watching?
So I think the most powerful thing that I've learned in therapy is a very simple phrase. My therapist tells me, bad things were done to you, you are not bad. And I just think it's so important to separate yourself from the evil that was perpetrated against you, and know that you have so much worth, and you are precious, and that should never have happened to you. And it's a tragedy, and it's this horrible thing that nobody would blame you for. And you have to stop blaming yourself, because it wasn't your fault. And I just think if we can remember that we're all worthy of love and affection and kindness and good things to happen to us. And this was a terrible thing that happened, but it's not the end result. You can move on from it.
Wow.
Well, thank you.
Anything else?
No, we just appreciate you being vulnerable. We appreciate you
being courageous.
Yeah. And just the grace that you carry yourself with and the work that you've put in to get to where you are, because we know that that's a lot that you've invested into you and your family and into your future. So thank you for being with us today. Thank you for being a face of the fight.
Thank you so much for having me.